It's a national holiday that commemorates the 1956 march of around 20,000 women to the Union buildings against the country's pass laws. 64 years later, the struggle for women's emancipation is more complex, particularly in light of the coronavirus pandemic.
The deadline is looming, and the situation is much more complicated than it was a few months ago even. The theme is picking up on the fact that we have had 25 years of implementing what was agreed in Beijing. There are many unfulfilled promises from this 25-year journey. And we are saying between 2020 and 2030, but I'm focusing on 2025 because if we stretch it too long, we may walk slow. We need to see significant change by this generation, which we are dubbing Generation Equality.
Miss Universe, born less than 2 years before the first Women's Day was commemorated in South Africa in 1995, explains the day's personal significance to her.
I think for my generation, it's just us recognizing that there's a legacy that was left for us. Whenever I think about the women of 1956 and them marching to the Union buildings to fight for this equality that we speak of today, they started that fire, they started that spark. And I think it's for us, the generation of today, to pick up that baton and to say, look, they've run their race, they did what they can. And so now, it's our responsibility to pick up that baton and see what we can do.
A baton that must confront a growing phenomenon of violence, often murder that women and girls confront at the hands of South Africa's men, with the most recent crime statistics revealing a staggering 42,000 rapes in the last year alone, likely just a fraction of the real number.
We have to change gear and make sure that just as we have said, domestic violence is not a private family matter. It is a crime against a human being. All other crimes against women have to be put at that level. The issues of relating to violence against women as passion of crime, as a crime of passion, there's no passion there. It is just murder, and we really need to make sure that these murderers are dealt with whatever the law can bring to the fore.
And as the world's consciousness was awakened in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing, calls for gender equality and racial justice to be closely linked.
Sherwin, I once read somewhere, I think somebody said, being a black woman is like being black twice. And, it struck a chord. It means absolutely everything. Like Mama said, now we're speaking of Brianna and, say her name. Because women tend to be in the shadows sometimes when we're fighting this, and people do forget about them. And so, as a young black woman myself, I feel they do go hand in hand. You can't have one conversation without the other.
I really want to make it very clear that racial and gender inequality must not be separated. Otherwise, we delay in the progress we should be making. Women of color should not end up losing again in this momentum about race.
Human rights are women's rights.
2020 also marking the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform of Action, where implementation remains uneven. And with less than 10 years to go before the SDG deadline of 2030, standing on the sidelines, at least according to these two, is simply no longer an option. Sherwin, Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.